Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Can you just put in the chat if you can hear me? That would be great. Yes, Anne can hear me. Maureen is here. Tom is here. Yes. Very good. Very good. Okay. So, self-producing made easy. I'm very happy that all of you are joining me. Greg, I see you're here. Excellent. Wonderful. Okay. So, how many of you are writers and you're here thinking about self-producing? It's easy, right? Your favorite thing to do. How many of you have already produced already? Can I see, put in the chat if you've already produced already and you know? Yep, Greg, I know you have. Anybody else? Anne, I think you produce in your barn, right? Maureen, you were at Nymph? So we have some people here that are a little bit familiar at the depot, I'm sorry, and produces in the depot in Connecticut. We have some people here that are already familiar with self-producing, but they're here for the expert tips and tricks that Pat and Tom have made a career out of. So Tom is here. Pat, are you here? Can you please put in the chat box if you're here? I think Pat's having trouble finding his way. So I'm here. Can you, Vinny, the chat box. The chat should be at the very top or the very bottom. It says, or question and answer. Do you see the question and answer? I see all of that. So just look down at the bottom and then you'll see it. I'm glad you're here, Vinny. Okay, so Tom, I know that you're here. I am going to promote you. You here, Tom? I just promoted you. Hello? Hi, Tom. How are you? You're muted though. Can I hear you?
There we go.
Oh, excellent. All right, so I'm just going to do this and go to the next slide. This is a live event. There's going to be a question and answer period at the end where you can step into the room with us and ask questions, just face to face. So I'm thrilled that you're here. No pitching of your individual show, but I do want you to ask questions. And I want you to stay all the way to the end for an extra special bonus surprise. So Tom is here. I am going to try one more time to get Pat. I think he's having some technical difficulties. So Tom, do you want to introduce yourself while I try to get Pat?
Hey, it's Tom. I'm trying to make myself look like my picture. So how's that? Does it match? Okay. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to be here. I'm excited to share any thoughts that I can give to be helpful to all of you. I know how difficult this business is, and any little gems can be so useful, and I'm really glad to be here. And thanks for Kate for putting this together.
Well, thank you for helping out. Yeah. Pat's.
I just forwarded him the link. He said that he did not receive it, so he just received it, and he should be chiming in shortly.
And I'm glad you found chat, Vinny. Woo! Good. So chat is the way that you're going to be able to talk to us. Tom can see the chat. I can see the chat. We also have our beautiful assistant, Jessica, here, and she's going to be helping us. So if you have a question, and we sort of like get into it here, She will also be able to put up any links that we refer to. No, but you can watch mine.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm one more time trying to see, and Pat is not here yet, but he will make his way over soon. Ah, Pat? Yes. Pat? Hello?
There he is.
Hi.
Hi. Where are you? Yes. Okay. Step into the room, Pat.
There I am.
There he is.
There you are. Woohoo! Sorry about that technical glitch here.
The sun is still shining in Westfield.
Yeah, it's just starting to go down.
Pat's in San Francisco. I'm on Long Island. And Tom, are you in New York?
I'm in New York City, yes.
Fantastic. Great. So this is us. Patrick Blake has produced The Exonerated off-Broadway, as well as 39 Steps, The Soap Myth, St. Joan and Hamlet, and My Life is a Musical, also in the Continuum. And Tom, you're best known for The Toxic Avenger and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Heloise and Abelard, The Toxic Avenger, Christmas Chaos. Is that happening again this year?
We're hoping. We're looking at some, well, actually what we're looking for is Christmas of next year, 18, because now is the time when we would want to get capitalize on all the shows who've done the first version of the show and say, hey, now it's time for you to think about your Christmas show for 2018.
Yeah, you have to prepare at least a year in advance, right?
Absolutely. Probably. Sometimes 2 years.
Oh, wow. Wow. I'm Cate Cammarata. I'm an off-Broadway producer, director, and dramaturg. Many of you have worked with me before, and I'm so happy that you're here. CreateTheater is really for all of us to get to know each other and really to be able to meet with producers like Tom and like Pat, who have a wealth of experience and a whole lifetime career of just producing and really looking for really good scripts. Because what people don't understand is that the writers who are looking for a producer, producers are also looking for writers. So we're all on this together, and it just helps all of us. So we promised 5 secrets. Secret tips and tricks to self-produce your show. It's not easy. None of this business is easy. But there is a template. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. But what you do have to do is to be smart and know a few things. It's always going to be different. Every show is going to be different. Every audience is going to be different. But there is a proven way of going about it. So the first secret, and really the most important, I think, is really to know your show, your audience, and what it's about. Because who's going to know your show better than you? So, know your show.
Yeah. So the first thing is, if you're going to understand your show well, you have to be able to give it that elevator pitch. And that's the idea of you have this much time to be able to tell somebody about your show because the elevator doors are closing, and that gives you, 4 or 5 seconds at the most. So you have to be able to say something extraordinarily interesting or captivating or of importance about your show, so that producer asks or other person asks, hey, what's your show about? You can't say like, well, it's a show about this guy who ends up being in this place, and then suddenly it takes 5 years later. I mean, you've already lost it. It needs to be, I have a musical about diversity in the United States, or I have a musical about interracial relationships in the United States, or it has to be that short and that interesting that somebody goes, okay, I want to hear more about that. Then if they say, I want to hear more about that, then you can tell them a little bit more about what that's going to be and what the show's going to be. But it's about capturing that initial interest in those first few seconds. And literally, it is that first few seconds that when somebody learns that you're a writer, what are you working on? I'm working on X. And it has to be very concise and extremely interesting.
It's kind of like you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yes.
right? So everything has to represent you well, from the very beginning to the submission, to the website. Just know exactly that elevator pitch, be confident, you love your play, and then that communicates. Pat, you have some very different types of shows. Do you want to talk about the audience?
Well, the question that I always ask a playwright is, who's your audience? And nothing puts me off their show more than when they say it's for everybody. Hamilton wasn't for everybody at the beginning. Hamilton was successful because hip hop fans came to see it, public theater people came to see it, Lin-Manuel Miranda fans came to see it. It became a show for everybody when it got rave reviews and became a big hit. You need to know who you're initially going to get to come to see your show. That's your audience. And you need to know who they are and how you're going to appeal to them.
Yeah, because, when you think about a marketing campaign for any particular show, the first question is how do we, in some senses, niche market it? Who is the target? Where's the low-hanging fruit, as we call it? Which are the people that are going to go, okay, these are the ones who are going to come see this show if they just hear the title or the subject matter. So to Pat's point, when somebody says, my show is for everyone, well, you can't market to everyone. It's impossible. You have to market toward the low-hanging fruit, the people who are going to be able to say, I'm going to go see that show. So if a producer asks you who is your audience, have an answer for that. And you should say, it's between 20 and 30-year-olds who grew up on the East Coast and do this or do X or do Y. Whatever the answer to that question is, know where the low-hanging fruit lie, and then you can expand beyond that.
Well, the elevator pitch has to be thought out and prepared. Hi, my name is, I've got a show about, and it's called, I think it's going to appeal to, I think you'd love it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good elevator pitch, because if it's a producer is interested in that particular audience niche and that particular subject, they're gonna say to you then, okay, well, let's hear some more about it, or let's have a coffee, or let's get on the elevator with me and tell me about it on the way down on the ride. And that gives you another minute and a half to be able to share that experience.
I think we've all talked to writers who really don't have that down, who just start saying, oh, well, it's not done yet, and I think it's going to be, and I think that sort of is off-putting, because you have to do the homework on yourself first.
You had just said, well, I'm working on this piece, but it's not done yet. My response would be, well, reach out to me when it's done, because I don't want to reach out that's not done. So I think one of the kiss of death is never say my piece is not ready, or I'm going to do another revision and it's going to be great. Well, then show me the revision that's great. Don't waste my time now. If you're going to approach somebody, here's what you have and here's the piece. This is what it's about. This is my audience, and you just throw it at them.
So it really is about you and how you come across. Come across confident, know your topic, know that it is great. And so you're selling you and you're selling the show. But what is special about your show? Why does your show need to be told now? Why is it so important to tell your story right now? That's what I always look for. Why, if I'm going to go to all this work and invest all this money in this show, why does it have to be told now? What is so necessary and urgent? But you have to find that. You have to find that in your own script, and then you have to communicate it.
Yeah. Well, you can use that to demonstrate the passion you have for your show, so the person you're pitching to really knows that you're behind this 100% and that you really believe in your own show, which is really important. But if you have something like an A-list movie star who's dying to be in it, that helps sell it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a selling point, like Pat just talked about, having a star or having some catch or some glitch or some thing that's going to be interesting about it is helpful. If you've got Hugh Jackman wants to star in your musical, that's a very opening an interesting thing. Now, of course, that's a huge example, but it could be that you've got a local person, actor that's interest to the community, and that could be very helpful as well in terms of opening doors and getting people as to what's special about this particular outing of this show. If you've got somebody that's known well in the area, that's helpful. But and also the other element of being special about the show is making sure that it's topical for the time that we live in. You know, telling a show about a couple in the 1940s might be very, very interesting, but why is it important today? What are you telling in your story that's going to resonate with people in the year 2017, soon to be 2018? It might be a really lovely story from that time period, but there needs to be something important about it to be able to capture the attention of the marketing, that so people are going to want to come see your show.
It doesn't mean that every period piece doesn't have to be told now. I was just reading some of Brecht's, because Brecht wrote actually in a time very similar political upheaval as our own, and some of them are becoming more and more resonant. So just because it might be in the 40s doesn't necessarily preclude that it shouldn't be told now, but I think that's a really important point. Okay, know your show. The second secret that we wanted to talk about is you really have to build your team. And then you have to put together a workable timeline. So, Pat, are you still with us, Pat?
Pat is muted temporarily.
Okay. All right. So, I think
Pat, you need to unmute yourself.
maybe I can do it. Okay, Pat, I'm trying to unmute you.
There we go. Oh,
Hey,
Pat,
there we go. Welcome
Yes.
back, Pat.
thank you. Yeah, the first two people that you need are a lawyer and a general manager. The lawyer is going to draft the contracts for you, and the general manager is going to help you go through the maze of the business aspects of producing. You need to have a theater lease. You need to have contracts with actors. You need to get involved with various unions and all of their contracts. And so you can't do that by yourself. Those are the two essential people that you need on your team, the lawyer and the general manager. That's the first thing you should do.
the lawyer is so important, always, especially with unions, right, Pat?
What? Am I still on?
Yes.
Maybe it's because I'm in California that I keep freezing up.
We should be freezing. It's warm where you are.
Well, the unions, of course, are very involved, if any, because, you know, in many self-produced pieces, you're not going to have a lot of unions involved, and maybe it's just going to be yourself as either the star or you're working with friends that are going to be non-union. But whenever the unions do get involved, there are certain requirements that are going to be necessary, and it's really important that you understand what they are going into the process as opposed to while you're in the process. Because if you find out that there are certain requirements that are necessary, you might not have budgeted for them and budgeted for pension and welfare and health payments and things like that, which can add up very quickly. So you want to make sure that your attorney is making you aware of the potential pitfalls of what happens when you have equity members or union musicians or union stagehands, if that would be the case. You know, if you can, you know, if you're doing something on a very small level, the best thing is, you know, in a local theater level, the best thing is to try to remain as much out of the union process as possible while you're developing a piece, because that gives you the flexibility to be able to work on a much lesser financial level, and that can be really important while you're working on developing something.
And then a general manager prepares the budget.
Yeah,
sure.
Even for a reading, it's really important to have a budget in place.
Yeah, you need it to know what you need to spend money on, how much, and when. The actors you're going to have to pay at the end of the reading or the first week of performance. The theater you're going to have to pay in advance and then weekly. There are all sorts of considerations that the general manager who's done this over and over again can help you with. The thing about raising money that you have to be aware of is that there are rules about who you can ask for money and how much. In order to invest in a show, you need to have be a qualified investor, which means you have to have a certain income or certain amount of money in the bank. Otherwise, you have to file additional SEC paperwork, which becomes difficult to do a show if you have to file that paperwork. So you try and always get qualified investors.
Right.
And if you're raising front money for a show, you can only ask 4 people.
Right. And then the flip side to that conversation is if you're going to do it through a GoFundMe or a fundraising site, where it's money that's being raised, those are ways that you can go around finding, $5,000 or $10,000 that might be able to help you do your production carefully. But that's where, if you're working with the attorney, he can advise you as to the appropriate ways to either raise money through a social networking site or through, as Pat pointed out, the official ways, which is much more complicated because it requires the accredited investors and it requires the ability to actually file the paperwork as necessary, so that the Attorney General is not going to come after you and go, you created a Ponzi scheme here to take money from your friends and you have no intention of giving it back to them. So it just depends on your approach. If it's the simplistic level of a GoFundMe, that's one level, and if it's, as Pat points out, the more complicated version of actually raising funds, just make sure you have the right attorney advising you.
On a smaller level, like in the showcase or the reading level, you still need a general manager, because a general manager has not only the expertise, he's done it so many times or she's done it so many times, but they also have relationships. So they can probably get recommendations for rehearsal studios at a much cheaper rate than you can get. They can probably have access to stars or casting directors. In general, it just makes your life a whole lot easier. So especially if you're self-producing, I would get a lawyer and a general manager on your team first. Then after the business aspects and the legal aspects are all taken care of, and yes, you do need a legal aspect even if you're in the beginning stages of development, especially if you're going to be raising money. I think on the creative end then, you want to look for somebody to craft the vision. Even for a reading, you should think about hiring a director. I know a lot of playwrights do act as their own director, but guys, what do you think about that? I always try to recommend that my playwright get the benefit of another head. What do you think about that?
Having had the writer direct a show early in my career, I made it a rule that I would never have the playwright and the director be the same person. I do not believe it works out.
Well, I would agree with that completely, because the director is brought on board to execute the vision of the author. And if the director and the author are the same person, there's no dialogue between those two people. And if you're the producer and the director and the author, there's no other voice than yours being heard in the room. And the other thing is, when you do a production or a reading or a presentation, as the case may be, the most valuable thing as the author is to be able to sit there and watch the presentation and watch what's happening. And if you've directed it, you've already removed yourself from that possibility to be able to sit there and experience it as an audience member. Because that's the most important thing when you have your first presentation of your particular show, is to say, okay, I'm going to sit here, I'm in the audience, the director put this on, I'm going to watch it. What do I get out of it? And the more hats you're wearing, the less distance you have from the material, and the more dangerous it becomes, because you think it might be perfect, but we might have 49 people in the audience who go, I have no idea what I just saw.
Right. And I think it's very important for you as a playwright during the reading, during the showcase, to be able to be in the back of the room and engage the audience's reaction to your own work. You need that. You need to be part of the audience and see what they're experiencing. So that is not the place to cut corners. So then with the director's help and general manager often, it's time to cast your production.
You can go to, there are a lot of people who make their living casting shows, and I would recommend that you find a good casting director who is equally passionate about your show, and they can get your cast for you.
Yeah, it's helpful because, you know, the complexity of getting a group of people together, whether it be 4 people or whether it be 14 people, you know, when you're working on a level where you're putting something together for the first time, you're going to have people drop out on you, you know, 3 days before rehearsal. And the last thing you want to be doing is picking up the phone and calling everybody you know to be able to take over that particular role because you start rehearsals in 3 days. So having a casting director or a casting director type person in that slot takes, again, another pressure off you so you can concentrate on your show and not on casting your show.
Exactly.
Plus, if a casting director does it, casting directors do shows one after the other all the time. They can be working on multiple shows at the same time. As a producer, you're working pretty much on that one show. So if an actor doesn't come through, is irresponsible, they annoy you and you might not hire them again. But if they do the same thing to a casting director, that could close them out of being considered for multiple shows. So it's always better to have somebody with that kind of oomph, as it were.
Right. Right. I would agree. I would definitely agree. And if you have a two-hander or a very, very small cast, maybe your director feels that they can get it together. And I think that's always a good resource because a director works with a lot of actors. And if you trust your director, I think that you should trust them on that too. But definitely, if it's a larger cast, a casting director is really the way to go. I think that's a wise choice.
Yes.
Now, for the design, excuse me?
I agree.
For designers, most of the general managers already work with designers, or else it can come from a recommendation of a director, a musical director. That's why it's so important to have your team in place because people work with people they want to work with. So that's after you know your show and what it's about, then the second thing is get your team in place. That's really critical. And you can't really put your team in place before you know what your show is about. So you really have to take these in the proper steps.
Yeah, and also in terms of the designers who you're going to hire, you know, the level and scope of your production is going to decide what you need. You know, if you're simply doing a reading, you might not need any designers. If you're doing a slightly enhanced reading, you might want to have a scenic designer add something to the element, or a lighting designer add a little of something. If you're doing a full production, obviously with set and costumes and light and sound and all that, that's a very different thing. But it's important for the designers to be on the team early in the process because it allows you to keep control of costs. You know, because if a designer is going to ask for X, Y, and Z, you want to know all that up front. You don't want to, you know, bring a lighting designer on very late into the process who then says, oh, by the way, it's going to cost you an additional $7,000 to be able to rent these lights that we need, and you don't have a budget for that, so you're going to be in trouble. So you're going back to your general manager who's going to help you determine what are your production needs. It's planning it out in advance so there's as little surprises as possible in the process.
Oh, that's so important. One of the things that you do not want are surprises in the design. So when you're a writer, the more general you can be, according to the locale and the place, I think that would be the better choice. You know, we don't all have to be like Shaw, who was so meticulous. I mean, The Exonerated was just a bare stage, right, Pat?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And that was that way of designing or the vision of what the show should be came from Bob Balaban, the director.
Right, the director.
And the opening line of the scenic description of the Toxic Avenger says, "The curtain rises on a toxic waste dump." Well, okay, that could go many different directions. It could be as simple as a couple of garbage cans, or it could be an entire set constructed of toxic waste barrels. But it was a suggestion from the author as to what the thought would be, and then the designers take what the production budget is and create what's necessary around it.
Right. So you can't just let these things just happen. You have to have a timeline and dates. So
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about this already. You know, your lawyer is going to draw up the documents that you need and make sure all of that paperwork is in order, and then the general manager is going to help you come up with that estimated budget, which is going to involve, you know, the production costs, rehearsal costs, other developments, and what if you're going to run the show for a period of time, what's that going to cost on a weekly basis. And knowing, you know, when you know all of that, that's going to be your physical production costs that are going to be dealt with. You're going to know, I need X dollars to be able to get to performance one, and then you need to find a way to raise those particular dollars. But, you know, knowing what the dollars are is the key to not waking up in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning and going, I have no idea how much money I need to be able to pull this thing off, and what have I gotten myself into. So that's where the general manager, the lawyer, and this timeline process that we talked about prevents you from having that ulcer that's going to grow really quickly if you don't know actually what's happening with your particular show. And then, of course, beyond that, then is the costs of the marketing and the publicity.
And your timeline is dependent on two schedules. One is the director, because if the director's in demand, they will only have a certain time period where they can work on your show. And the other one is theater availability. The hottest real estate market in New York is theaters. There are thousands of shows and not that many theaters. And so your timeline will tend to be dictated by when you can get a theater and when your director can direct the show.
Yep.
And I would just want to say one thing. Even if you have a reading, don't say only a reading. I don't need any publicity and I don't need any marketing. You still need a logo. You still need to be able to send out email blasts to try to get people into the room for your reading, unless, of course, it's just a table read where the goal is different. The goal is to try to make sure that your script works. But if it's a reading at music stands, you're still going to want to fill the room. So even with a reading, you do have to start marketing and publicity strategy early. So yeah, I'm trying to get the next slide.
Here we go.
The third secret.
Oh, the fun part.
Looking for love. Love equals money or creative fundraising.
Yeah.
Wanted to have a little fun with that title there. So we're looking for OPM, other people's money. We really don't want to use our own resources, if at all possible.
Yeah. And you don't want to have to go to your friends and family as your exclusive way of getting money, because that was the quickest way of having people not to talk to you at the holidays if they didn't make their money back in the show, which they won't. But they're fun to practice on. You can say, do you mind if I practice my money raising techniques on you to see if you've got any criticism?
Yeah, no, a great way is literally to use that opportunity to say, hey, you know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to be asking a bunch of people for money. So let me practice on you first. Like here's my elevator pitch, and you give it, and here's who my audience is, and here's why I think this show is going to be applicable to people, and why it's going to make sense. Here's my marketing strategy, and you know, allow them to pick apart the plan. And you know, and if you've got an aunt or an uncle that's got a few extra dollars, they might at the end of your pitch actually go, you know what, I'll give you $500, or I'll give you $1,000 to go do this experiment and see what's going to happen. But use them as a tool, because the hardest thing, raising money is extremely difficult. It's just not easy in any sense. And asking people for money only gets easier the more times you ask. And the more you practice at it, and the more you have all of your information from all these earlier slides under your belt, that's when you come across as knowledgeable, and you understand your piece, and you know how you're going to get that investor's money back. That's the ultimate goal, because nobody wants to just give you a check for money if they don't think they're actually going to get it back. Okay, yes, if it's a charity, that's another thing. But you know, theater should not be a charity. Theater is a business, and you should have a business plan to be able to return those investments back to the person who wants to write you that check for $500 or $1,000 or $5,000 or $20,000.
And the first thing when you meet somebody that you shouldn't do is ask them for money. The money raising or asking people for money is something that you do with people that you know, that you have a relationship with. I know a lot of producers. Some of them I will ask, but I'll only do it if I tell them that I'm going to ask them for money, and that's the purpose of the meeting. And also because I know them, I'll know it's exactly the sort of show they have invested in the past, or like to invest in the past. It's not just calling them up out of the blue because I went down the list of people on IBDB, you know, and listed all the producers for a particular show, and just called them cold caller and saying, hi, give me money.
Yeah, it's really important also to continue to build those relationships and expand your base, but also really to try as much as possible to meet with people on a face-to-face, in-person basis, or even on a video conference call, because there are so many signals that you get from a potential investor that you can tell whether I should continue talking or I should stop talking, or they're not getting me, or I need to go a different direction, or they're looking for something else. It's very hard just in a simple phone conversation, and specifically an email conversation, because an email conversation is a one-sided conversation. You have no idea how your pitch is being perceived on the other end of it. And I you know, unless you were Lin-Manuel Miranda asking for money on Hamilton, I think it would be nearly impossible to ask somebody to write you a check based on an email pitch. So it's really a personal relationship between you and the person that you're asking to invest, and whether that investment be $50, $500, $1,000, or $20,000, it doesn't matter, because the person who's thinking about investing $25
are very rare.
Yes, that does happen. There's the people who only invest to go to opening night. But then again, that you're sort of more looking at a Broadway level, or something of a super high regional theater level, where they're going to be more interested in meeting the star than they are in actually supporting the product, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Kate, I see
you're
you're
muted.
almost back, but you're muted. Okay.
I had technical difficulties.
We are back. We just solved global peace while you were gone.
Yeah.
But
I'm glad to see the show continues. The show goes.
The number one takeaway from that is never put your own money in the show if you remember the producers.
Okay.
All right. So your presentation, always have it with you. Always be ready. One of the things that I wanted to say while I was in La La Land over there is that I'm just going to go back. That you always research the person you're pitching to. Remember, it's a sale. You are going to be making a sale. So what does that investor look for? I mean, somebody that I was speaking with, they wanted to have opening night tickets for their clients. Somebody else's daughter was into musical theater, and they wanted her to be able to have this experience. Everybody is investing in your show for a different personal reasons. So if you have a relationship with that person, you're going to know why that they're here. And so you'll be able to tailor make that experience. As another person said, I have a couple of $1 million. I've been around the world a couple of times, been there, done that. I've never produced a show on Broadway. Let's do that. So you have to really know what that person is looking for.
Can I get that person's number, by the way, Kate?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk later. Okay. So, yeah.
So, as Kate said, you have to be ready at any time because you never know when you might bump into somebody at a particular party and be like, oh my gosh, this person would be perfect for me. So you need to have something with you. You need to have the ability to, at the very least, give them a card about the show or a card about you so they can walk away and you have a follow-up or get their card. But the best thing is to always have all the elements with you, your business plan, your budget, your theme, why they will invest with you, the purpose of your show, et cetera, your one sheet, which is like a one-page document that outlines everything about your show. But the other thing is it should all be up here all the time. You should have it here at your instant disposal, because when an opportunity comes along and you meet somebody, you want to be able to capture them and excite them about your show and what you're doing and make them feel like, my gosh, this is very special and I want to be involved with this as quickly as possible. So it's about that, having that knowledge, but then having the backup tools with you to be able to support it as necessary.
If you're having a face-to-face meeting with someone, there's no reason why you can't be prepared and have a leave behind, it's called, where a piece of paper that has the business plan, the budget, and all of that stuff. Something physically that you can leave behind after the meeting so the person can refer to it.
And also something that you can have in front of you as you're pitching to the person. Because, because the one thing that happens, inevitably when you start pitching to people is you get that sudden mind blank where you're like, oh my God, everything's gone. I can't remember anything about my show except the title. Well, that's why if you have a little cheat sheet in front of you that lists the highlights of the important things, it's perfectly fine to be able to glance down at that and help you remind yourself of what the important things about your show are, because everybody gets nervous when you pitch, and also the person that you're pitching to is going to appreciate that, because then you're not going to be a frozen mess standing in front of them trying to explain why I want you to give me some money. It makes them comfortable, it makes you comfortable, and it's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, we're halfway through here. So we're going to build the incentives for your investors. And then I want to take a recap before we go on, because I think there's value in reviewing what we've done. Never just take your investors' money and just disappear. You're accountable. You have to be a good steward of their funds and their trust, because you don't want to get a reputation for just taking the money and run. I mean, that sounds like a movie, but you really are promising to return their investment if at all possible. So you have a very, very sincere relationship here, and a fiduciary relationship to be a good steward of their money.
Yeah, I was going to say, I recently made a smaller investment in a film in California from an author that was a playwright here in New York that I've known for many, many years. And he's gone back and started working in some LA situations, and he was looking for small investments in his play that was being turned into a film, and I made the investment, and he's done a brilliant job of informing us of the process, where they are in the filming process. All the talent has been hired. They finished the filming. They're entering into the process of getting into the festivals, where they are in the festival process. And it made me feel like, wow, so that amount of money that I gave you, I'm getting constant updates. And that's the best thing, because if he had just taken the money and gone away and a year later I heard back from him and was like, oh, sorry, you know what? Well, it didn't work out and it's the end of the ride. We're closing the company. Thanks. You know, I'd be upset. But if that happened after a year's worth of updates and, you know, we really tried, we didn't get that distribution deal, I'd be like, well, you know what? You tried really hard. You did everything that you could. I don't feel bad about that. And I'll probably invest with you again. But if you don't if you disappear, you might as well just kiss that investor goodbye, unless you hit the jackpot.
Right. And they are hard to come by. So you want to give them an experience. Like I said before with my other investor, they know it's not a mutual fund. They know that the risk is very, very high. Instead, what they're buying is an experience. Make it fun. Invite them to the opening night parties. Invite them to the previews. Invite them into a rehearsal. Anything that they're looking for, find little ways to give them swag. Give them the CD. Just have them participate, and to make it fun, because you're familiar with it and you know all the stress, but they are on it because it's glamorous and because they want to have some bragging rights, and just make it fun for them, and you'll have an investor for life.
Yeah. And never, ever, 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 ever promise, I will get your money back. I guarantee it. Never, ever say those words, because you have no idea what's going to happen. And, you're obviously in violation of Attorney General rules if you say that, because it's a high-risk investment. So just never say that. But as Kate said, make them part of the process. Make them feel like that $500 or that $1,000 or whatever the case may be is going somewhere where you're actually putting people to work and you're creating jobs for people and you're making it exciting to be able to explore this property and see if it can actually be a really exciting piece to be involved in. And believe me, people feel really good about small investments if they can see the results of that investment.
Because in the end, it is a business deal.
Yeah.
And taking care of your customers, in this case, your investors, is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah,
making them feel part of it.
And a lot of what we do on these micro levels is taking front money from people. Front money is very specific to the theatrical industry, which is not common at all in any other industry other than theater. And front money can be collected, and it's money that's very high risk capital, because generally there's probably a good chance they're not going to get it back. But you are allowed as a theatrical entity to be able to collect what's called front money from up to 4 people. That's the specific wording. Up to 4 people would assume that it's 4 people, because I'm not really sure what 3.5 people are, so I don't really know how that works. But up to 4 people can give you an amount of money without all of the entanglements that are necessary with the offering papers and things like that. So if you've got 4 friends and family or 4 good friends that each want to give you $500 and you can raise $2,000, you can do that without the complications of having to go through a final offering plan and all these things. So that's a good backup. Just remember, up to 4 people is the cutoff.
All right, so far it's know your show, build your team, and then get all the legal structure and the budget in place. Secret number 4. Are you still with me? I want to see in the chat if you're with me. Hopefully I haven't put anybody to sleep yet. This isn't one of my college lectures. It should be a little bit more exciting than that. Can I just see? Yay, Maureen's here and you're not asleep yet.
Okay.
Good. Greg, you're still with us.
Okay.
Yep, good. Good. I'm glad you're not one of my students here. You're all here with me. Okay, so step number 4, 5 things you must do after your reading, because it's such a big reach to finally get to that reading or that showcase or that show. Then it's like, I want to take a vacation, but you're not done yet. So hold off on that vacation, because there's a follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is whenever you do a production or a reading or a table reading or whatever, you should have in mind what you want to do next after that process. Because certainly as soon as the reading is done or the production is done or whatever, yeah, you need to take a moment to breathe and relax and go like, oh my God, I got through it and I'm still alive. How fantastic. But the most important thing is you have to know where you want to go next when you get to that point, because it can be very depressing when you finish a big reading or presentation of something. You take that moment to breathe and relax, and then you go, oh my God, now what do I do? That's even more daunting because you put all this effort into doing something and you don't know what's next. So if you're going to do a reading, you should know that, well, after the reading, I think that the next thing I want to do is try to get a small theater in the community interested in doing it, or submitting it to regional theaters, or doing something with it, so that when you finish step one, this process of getting it produced, you don't feel like you've gone back to square one and you're starting all over again. Make whatever this event is part of a larger process, and understand what that larger process is.
So it's very important to contact the people that were there, especially if it's a reading and you have that list. It's a little bit harder in a showcase when you're selling tickets, but especially if it's a reading and you're on the developmental process, contact each person that came and email them, or afterwards just give them your business card and say, you know, I'd love to hear what you thought of this. I'd love to have some follow-up, because that's one of the reasons why you're doing a developmental stuff like that. And then take the time with your creative team to really look at the feedback and consider it. Now, not all feedback will be as helpful as others, and you have to always consider the source. But if everybody is mentioning something in particular, it would really be smart of you to address that.
Well, and especially when you think about, you know, you asked somebody to come to your presentation, so you got 2 hours of their life. You should at least give them 10 minutes to be able to respond back to you. You know, especially, you know, even if they didn't like it or they hated it, you still give them the opportunity to tell you what they thought. Might not be have any value or any cognitive or useful thoughts for your process, but, you know, you asked somebody to come, they came, then you're entitled, you are required to hear what they have to say, even if it is they don't like it. Because even if they don't like it, it might not be that it might be that they didn't like the presentation, but you can still learn something from somebody who says they didn't like something. Listen to the clues as to what they're sending you, because there's going to be something in there that's useful.
And if you're smart, you continue to build the excitement. All the people that gave you feedback, they were there because they took an interest. They gave you enough thought to actually write to you because they care. So if you're smart, get their email and put them on a newsletter. Keep engaging with them. Every time you're going to have a next step or in between steps, if there's any excitement or engagement that you can build on your website, share things.
Your Facebook page.
Your Facebook page. Yes, you should have a Facebook page for your show. Continue to engage with these people. Don't let them go cold. That's a really super important tip that not everybody realizes.
Yeah. And also because if they were an investor that gave you a $500 check or a $50 check, you know, there's a good chance that they'll give you another one if they can see that there's progress happening and it's going someplace. You know, everybody feels good about writing a check when they can see a positive outcome out of something. It might not mean they got their money back, but they're still willing to write that check if they can see forward motion. And forward motion is the key to keeping them engaged.
Right. And they want to feel part of it too. So we're here at the last secret tip and trick. Be your own best producer. So drum roll, please, Tom.
Yeah. When you start, you know, going back to slide one, hire your lawyer, hire your general manager, and set a budget and stick to it. Because it's so easy when you're producing your own work to go, oh, well, I'll write another check for $500 or another $750. What's that going to hurt? And the first time you make that mistake is is the downfall of everything, because it just becomes a slippery slope of, well, it was only 500. Well, it's only 750. No, it's only 2,000. No, it's only 5,000. You have to set up a realistic budget that's created by your general manager, which is combined with the goals that you want to achieve for the production. And you have to then become the mean producer that says, no, you can't spend any more money. No, you can't have that. And when you are self-producing, you have to remember that you've got to be able to tell yourself no.
If you're wearing multiple hats, if you're an actor in the show and also the writer of the show, it's important to remember which hat you're wearing, because an actor telling another actor something means one thing. The writer of the show telling an actor in the show something means something else. So you always have to be clear when you're talking to somebody involved in it, what hat you're wearing, so they understand where you're coming from. Especially if you're the writer and you're talking to the director, but you're also the producer. So you have to make sure the director knows whether it's the producer telling him to do something or an actor giving him feedback or her feedback.
Yeah.
And talk about your show everywhere. Have business cards with the logo of your show. Just give them out. I mean, they're pretty cheap. I think you can get 500 at Staples for what, $20?
Less than that, yeah.
Less than that sometimes. I guess I have to shop at the right places. But talk about it everywhere on your Facebook page. Have a separate website. Have a separate Facebook page just for your show. Everywhere you go, let your name be synonymous with your show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm skipping ahead slightly, but one of the rules I always have is, I always say never work with anyone that you wouldn't want to have dinner with. And I know that sounds like a simplistic rule, but you might want to say, oh, I really want that actor in the show because I know that they're going to bring so much to the table. I can't stand them, and I don't want to even be in a room with them for 5 seconds, but I know they're going to be great. Well, that will come back to bite you in the ass. It really will. Because if you can't stand to be around somebody, theater is the most collaborative process in the world. It requires extreme patience, extreme collaboration. And if you know going into a situation you can't work with, you hate that person, it's going to come to blows at some particular point, and it's just not worth it in the end. You really try to create a situation where all the people that you have around you are in support and going in the same direction. Now, there's always going to be some holdouts, and there's some this and there's some that, but don't go into the situation knowing that this person is impossible and I can't believe I'm going to say yes and work with that person. Don't talk yourself into that. It will come back to bite you in the ass.
There's going to be tech hell. There's going to be hell week. This is just theater. You have to expect that. That's why you only want to play with people that you really like. And when I talk about don't do marketing and PR alone, that's what I mean. Have the entire group, the entire cast, everybody on your team, everybody should be marketing and promoting the show, because it's really not just you. You might be the author and it started with you, but you've got now all this team that's just pulling together. So everyone's going to help promote this play.
Absolutely.
Here, I can't go up to the door and answer it.
What's that? That has a clandestine visitor.
Okay. Did I unmute you?
What?
Okay.
See? I'm sorry.
That's
I had
right.
that. You do this out of your house, people say, come here. And I go, I'm on the phone. Sorry.
So, it's time to step into the room. But first, I promised you, all of you who stayed to the end, and I see who you are, there's a super secret bonus that I'm holding out just for you. And I know almost all of you, so I'm really, really pleased to say that this super secret bonus is a 30-minute free consulting session with me for everybody that stayed to the end of this webinar. You can ask me questions about your script, about team building, questions about the submissions and submission process. I know Karen's on here. Just this week, I wrote her a recommendation for NAP. questions about next steps, you know what, use me as a resource, because this really is a community, and it's all about, you know, giving as well. So I really am looking forward to sitting down. It'll be like having coffee with friends at this point, because I know almost all of you. So just get back to me at Kate at CreateTheater to set up that session. So now it's time to step into the room, and one by one, we're going to, at least 5 questions. We're going to see how long this takes. But at least 5 questions. 5 of you are going to come into the room, and you don't have to do anything. Just tell me in chat that you want to come in. I'll promote you as a panelist. And if you don't mind having your face here, like the Brady Bunch here with all of us, you can stay in for the rest of the time, and we'll have some fun. So who wants to go first? Just put a little chat in there, and somebody step up to the home plate here. Okay, Greg. Greg was the first one to jump in. So, Greg, can you talk?
There he is.
Yep.
Greg is loading.
Hey, Greg.
Hi.
Welcome into the room. How are you?
Hey, I'm fantastic. Listen, Pat, Tom, Kate, just thank you guys so much for lending your time, your expertise, and your wisdom. Invaluable. Really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
What's your question?
So let's ask the magic money question.
Mm-hmm.
The question that everybody has. I know you got into it a little bit, but I guess it's a little bit of a 2-part question. So first of all, you mentioned that when we're talking about front money, you can only ask up to 4 people. Number 1, does that question apply in regional theater as well? And number 2, can you offer any thoughts or insight about enhancement deals? What do you guys know about that? Can you offer some thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, first part, front money would apply to any commercial producer that wants to do an entity. So if a commercial producer like myself or Pat is working on developing a show, then we're bound by the front money rules until such time that you have subscription documents that somebody becomes an investor in the actual property itself. Because front money people can ask for their money back if the show is capitalized. They still receive some percentage. Yeah. Going forward. So that's the sort of super simple question there. In terms of enhancement money, that's an entirely different conversation, because regional theaters, 25 years ago, regional theaters would do shows out of the kindness of their heart because they wanted to do a show and they thought it would fit into their season and it was going to be a great fit. Because of the fact that theater has gotten so expensive, what has happened is some regional theaters, not all, but some regional theaters have found the enhancement money deal to be incredibly lucrative to them. And, especially the large theaters like Fifth Avenue in Seattle and Old Globe and Alliance Theater in Atlanta and Signature in Washington, they know that if a commercial producer comes along with them with a show and says, hey, I want you to do, XXX show, they're going to go, oh, I see commercial producer, I see deep pockets, I see $1 million. They want that amount of money invested to them in advance to be able to do the show. Now, smaller regional theaters, for example, when we did Toxic Avenger at the Alley Theater, we did a much, much, much smaller enhancement in the $100,000 region because they weren't asking for an incredible amount of money. And we were able to say, okay, that's something that's more affordable, and we're going to save money in the long run because it's cheaper for us to do that development work in that space at a lower level. Unfortunately, the enhancement money question has really been guided by the fact that regional theaters realize they can ask for it and they get it. But generally, that only happens when it's a commercial producer approaching a regional theater. If it's an author approaching a regional theater, they're not going to ask for enhancement money. But then the other side of that sword is they might not even be interested in your show, because without enhancement money, they'd be like, well, it's too expensive for us to do this. It's too risky. We might not be able to do it. So I didn't really answer the question other than tell you those are the pitfalls, in the sense that enhancement money is the new Bitcoin, I guess.
Well, it's a way of a producer getting to see the show fully realized and have to spend less on it.
Yeah.
I mean, a show off Broadway, a regular play, is going to set you back $750,000, probably, depending on the
Right.
cast size and stuff like that. But if you can do it in a regional theater for $200,000, you've got a great deal, because if you get rave reviews in St. Louis or Kansas City or Oakland or wherever, then you can use that as leverage to not do your first production off Broadway, but do it on Broadway.
Greg, are you asking the question from the perspective of a producer or the perspective of an author?
Producer, definitely. I've learned what authors do, and I've learned that I'm a much better producer than an author.
Well, then what Pat's advice was completely correct. You know, you do a show at a regional theater because $200,000 is going to get you a fully realized production, where it would be close to $1 million in New York City, and it's a much easier risk to take. And in some senses, like I just told you about Toxic Avenger, you could do it for $100,000. The one piece of advice I'd offer is, if you're going to do an enhancement deal, is ask the theater in advance. Okay, I want to do my show at your theater. What do you normally spend on a show realistically? Because don't let them tell you, oh, we only spend $200,000 on the show, when you know their budget is a $4 million budget, and you know they're spending $500,000 on the show. Because the thing that they want to do is undercut it and say, like, oh, we're so poor, we have no money, so we can't possibly do this show for less than $200,000. Try to get a comparative budget of a typical show in another season, and then say, okay, my show fits into that, or I want to enhance it with an additional $50,000 or $75,000, and have a realistic conversation about the costs. The 3 or 4 theaters I mentioned at the top, Fifth Avenue, Old Globe, Alliance, Signature, they're in the world where they just say it's $1 million, and they don't even think about what it actually costs. They just ask for $1 million. But
do the same fundraising rules apply when you're looking for enhancement money as the rules that we laid out in this workshop?
Well, yes, the front money exclusion would provide, but obviously if you're only going to have 4 people and you need to raise $100,000, it's going to have to be a significant chunk from each particular person. You can do it the same way through front money. You can also do it through an actual offering and going through it. But an offering is not cheap to put together. You're going to spend, depending on who your attorney is, anywhere between $5,000 and $75,000, just to give you a range of what the offering plan can cost to put together. So a front money scenario, as long as you have enough money to cover it, remembering that once you pass the 4-person threshold, you can't go any farther, so you've got to go toward an offering plan at that particular point. Another way to sometimes deal with enhancement money is to talk to the individual investor and make an arrangement with the theater where they make a tax-deductible donation to the nonprofit, which they don't become part of the investment package, but they get the charitable donation. And the tax write-off or tax-free plan does allow us to keep charitable donations. So that's another way of looking at it. Having somebody write a check directly to the theater that's earmarked for that particular production can be a way to enhance the production without it necessarily being part of the offering plan.
So kind of like the model that NIP uses would be a good way to go.
Yeah, that could work.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
That's
Sure.
a really smart way to go about it. And also, if you have an enhancement, sometimes you can walk away with some tangible assets. You can walk away with a design.
The set, right.
You can walk away with costumes. So make sure you walk away with something that you can carry on to the next thing. So
Yeah, I mean,
not just use.
Toxic Avenger went to the Alley Theater, didn't go to Broadway for several reasons, but we walked away with a full set and 2 sets of costumes that we rented out over a period of 3 years, and actually returned a significant amount of that investment because we had all these physical assets that we were actually do something with.
Right.
That's really helpful, you guys. Thank you. I won't take up any more of the time, but that's huge. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. The next one is Maureen also had a question. So Maureen, I am going to promote you into the room. So Maureen is from Cape Cod, and Maureen was in NYMF. And Maureen, go ahead. Can we hear you? I can't hear you.
She's muted.
Okay, there you go. I did it. I took care of it for you.
Thank you. I thank all of you. This is wonderful, great information. I have a question because I've got an appointment with a local community theater, semi-professional theater on the Cape. And I've met with several other theaters and they've all told me it would cost about $30,000 to do my production and get some promotion for it. And I've got some ideas. My show is about technology, and I've got some technology companies I can go to and ask for money, but I'm wondering, it's like chicken and egg. Do I get the theater to say yes first before I go to the, and I'll have to go to these people cold call because I don't mix in any circles where they are or know any of them. I can get a little more specific than that if that's okay. But
is the 30,000 the entire cost of the production, or is that an enhancement amount?
that's just a ballpark out of the air reaction from one of the artistic directors that I talked with. So
Well,
I don't know.
My suggestion would be to get the theater to say, hey, we want to do this, because then that gives you the leverage to go out to the individual tech companies and say, hey, we can get a production of this. I'm looking for X. It's as opposed to the reverse, which would be going to the tech company and saying, hey, I'm looking to get a production of this. If you give me X, I can go to a theater and maybe get a production. So the security of the theater saying, we're interested in doing this, we need X, is more valuable in the end run.
Okay. And to go to that community theater, I don't think they pay their actors. Should I be bringing them a suggestion for actors or work with them or ask?
Well, if they don't pay their actors, what do they need the $30,000 for?
I think my sense was to promote it, and it seems like that would be cheap too, but that's the number that I had in the theater that said they loved the play, but they don't have the money to promote it.
Well, I would say, okay, wow, 30,000, that seems really reasonable. Give me a budget of how you want to spend that $30,000.
Okay.
You know, give me just a ballpark budget. Where do you want to spend it in? Is it in social? Where is it and all that? Because that's going to give me the ability to go to these tech companies and go, oh my God, they're going to spend $7,500 in social on this, and your name's going to be all over it. So you'll be able to match the two, sort of removing yourself from the argument and saying, so I would say find out what the theater is going to spend it on, and then use that as a leverage point to go to the investor tech companies and say, wow, we've got to do this because they're going to spend $7,500 in Facebook ads and your name's going to be all over it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really smart. Or even individual investors, they're going to want to see a budget because they want to see how you're planning on using the funds.
Yeah, it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about with Greg and going to a regional theater and saying the regional theater wants an enhancement of X. Well, you need to know, is that $30,000, is that their normal budget for a show, or are they just going, oh my gosh, we've got somebody willing to throw money at us, so let's ask for 30. We really only need 10, but let's ask for 30. So when you ask for something more specific in terms of, yeah, I think I can get that for you, show me how you're going to spend it.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Well, I have two participants that are that wanted to be here tonight, but they were not able to be here, but they did pay for the webinar, and they're going to be listening to the replay, and I promise to ask their questions. So Beth and Rick, hold on, I'm going to ask you a question right now. So Beth is up in Boston. She has a question about cabarets. She's developing a one-woman show, and she's putting it together, and she wanted to know, are cabarets about the same expense as musical theater? If she wanted to put together a one-woman show around the Boston area, maybe take it to New York, what exactly is different about the cabaret contract than the normal musical theater and the showcase contracts?
um, it's called a periodic performance agreement. And basically, it means that you can do as many shows as you want, but you don't have a full 8-week schedule or 8 shows a week schedule, and the costs are less.
Yeah, because you're not looking at a weekly locked-in cost of having to do 8 shows.
Because the actors are paid on a assuming an 8 performances. You
Right.
pay them based on how many performances you have.
Yeah, so it's so a cabaret is a much more streamlined budget, because all you're going to have is your costs to be able to do that one particular evening, or if you do it 2 times a weekend or whatever the case may be, you're not locked into that 8 performance schedule. So it's much more reasonable, as opposed to doing a full-scale musical, which comes along with all the bells and whistles and associated pension and welfare and health and all those costs that go along with it. So it's a much more, especially in a 1-person or a 2-person event, it's a much more reasonable way of developing a show over a period of time, because you're just not locked in. So the cabaret experience is much more reasonable in terms of a full book musical approach or book play.
Great. And then Rick had a question. He said that what does a producer really want to see when the producer follows up and he sees that Rick or any author has a website? What does he want to see on the website? So he lights the fire. This is how he put it. I have to light the fire, and then once I get the fire big enough to interest other people, then what exactly do they want to see? What kind of goods do I have to deliver on my website? Are they looking for showcases, readings? What kind of development? And then, does anybody ever just read a script anymore and get interested just by reading the script?
Well, I read scripts all the time, and I like reading scripts. I can't think of what I'd like to see on an author's website. If it's a website for a particular show, production history would be nice. Any encumbrances, like does somebody else own a piece of it other than you? Because when you were originally to part of her, that would be nice to know. But I can't think of anything specific.
I would say, because a website, if you're going to do a website for as an author, or you're going to do a website for the show, there's 2 different things. If you're going to do a website as an author and you have several works, you want to make sure that the website clearly identifies those works and you can go to them. And I hate to say this, but within 3 minutes, the person going to that website is going to make a decision as to whether they like or want to know more about your show. So you want to make sure that you have the best of the best material on that, whether it's a script segment or whether it's a musical number or whatever the case may be. You want to make sure, because people now, I think, view the website as the elevator pitch. It's the same thing. You've got those few seconds to capture someone's attention, because we're so inundated with the amount of material on the internet. So if somebody makes it to your website, or they get a link and they view, you better blow them away in the first couple of minutes or in the first 30 seconds. So they're going to want to look further. Otherwise, they're just going to skip on. So that's what I would say about a website having to have the impact of the elevator speech in those first few seconds, and easy to navigate.
Thank you. So Rick, there's your question. Karen wants to step in just for a minute. So let me get Karen in. So Karen, hello. Are you here, Karen?
She is. Here comes Karen.
Hi, Karen, you want to see?
Here comes half of Karen.
There you are.
Hello, Karen.
All right, hold on. There, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. No, I just wanted to thank everyone. This has been so great. We've reached the point in the development of our show where we're considering both self-producing a workshop or an equity showcase. So I was just wondering if you could talk briefly about the pros and cons of those 2 options.
Workshop is a term of art that Equity uses because producers were abusing the concept of working on a show. And so now it costs a lot of money to do a workshop, much more than it does to do a showcase. So
Yeah.
I would, if I had a choice between a workshop and a showcase, I would do it a showcase because it would cost me less.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I would do a showcase 99% to 1 over a workshop, because the adjusted workshop contract for developing a show for a 3-week rehearsal period can run like $175,000, and a showcase is technically supposed to be capped at $25,000, which you can actually do it for that if you don't go crazy. So, and the end result is the same. You get the same out of it. Except you don't have to pay 3 weeks of pension and welfare and health and all these other things associated with it. So, unless you have unlimited means, the best way to do this is through the showcase appropriation, because you're going to get the same thing you would out of $25,000 that you'll get out of $175,000 from a workshop.
I've been bumping into writers who are telling me that they want to do a workshop with non-union actors, just to get around that.
Well, yeah, that you can do, of course. If you're in an environment who has a pool of non-union actors who you feel that are going to be able to provide you with the elements that you can to bring something to the next step, do it. I mean, why not? Why go the union route unless you have to? I mean, well, here on the East Coast in New York City, it almost tends to always be that way, because 90% of the people who you're going to want to use in something are going to be part of the union. So you're sort of looped into that. You can't really escape it. But if you're in an area, even in Western New Jersey or Southern New Jersey or Pennsylvania or Connecticut or, Kansas or Ohio or whatever, and there's I recently found, there's a gentleman, I won't say his name, but he's in Orlando because he's working with all of that talent that's in the theme park area. Some of it, of course, is union because of Disney, but a lot of it isn't. And there's a lot of talent down there that they're using to develop new work, because they're not bound by the conditions of equity in the workshop contract. So they're getting a lot of new work being done in the Orlando area. And you've got a lot of people down there who want to be involved in doing new work, and you can get them at a very reasonable rate. And they're excited about it because they're creating something new. So I don't know, Karen, where you're based.
I'm in the New York area.
You're in the New York area, so find some friends in Western Jersey.
Well, Karen's
Right, yeah, but if you're in a state with a major university, every year you're going to graduate a bunch of actors who are really good. And just the next year there's a new crop, and the next year there's a new crop. So any particular state, you're always going to have a group of people who could do a show.
But don't limit yourself to
unless you write plays with 80-year-old characters.
I mean, we don't know the subject of your particular play or whatever, but there are universities throughout the United States right now that are getting interested in doing new works, because there's so many musical theater programs that 25 years ago didn't exist. And they're looking for things to challenge their students. You've got Oklahoma University, which is doing incredible work. You've got Northwestern, which is doing amazing stuff. So maybe, if your subject matter and your talent pool is appropriate for a university level, look at that, because amazing work is happening at the university level, and it's completely non-union. And there's a lot of really interesting work happening in the university level.
Especially for Karen's piece. I am familiar with her piece. It's called Dear Prospective Student. And so it really is for the college age student. And I might have a lead for you, Karen. So we'll talk.
Oh, awesome.
Well, I would start by Googling top 20 musical theater universities in the United States. Carnegie Mellon will pop to the surface. There's going to be a bunch of them. And if Kate, at Stony Brook, maybe she has an in to be able to connect that up, because I literally think that the university world is the world of what regional theater was 30 years ago. Because regional theater, now the whole, when Greg's comment about enhancement has sort of imperviated regional theater, all the producers are now going, now wait a minute, let's start looking at regional theater. God forbid if they start asking for enhancement, that'll be a whole other thing. But I think we got a little window here where we can probably get some good work done before the universities start asking for investment funds.
Well, they're going to get smart really, really fast. But yeah.
But on the flip side of that, if the universities start collecting a lot of the new development work, it's going to take the pressure off the regional theaters to ask for enhancement, because the producers are going to be like, why should I work with you when I can do it for free at Carnegie Mellon or Oklahoma University or whatever the case may be? And that'll be a good thing, because it might take that pressure off of regional theaters, and then hopefully the regional theaters will be like, okay, it's not $1 million anymore. We'll settle for $250, or we'll, do it without asking for enhancement, which would be the ultimate goal.
Great.
Great, thank you.
That's coming up. That's what we're talking about in LMDA with the dramaturgs and colleges. All right, one last question. Anne, I haven't forgotten about you, so we're just going to promote one more and last question. So, Anne is also in Connecticut. Anne has a wonderful place called the Depot on a couple of acres in Connecticut. And for summer developmental house, I want to head out with some of our Rhymes Over Beat stuff to have readings out there, because she's very close to the O'Neill. A lot of smart audience members out there. So with that introduction, what's your question, Anne? Oh, I'm sorry, I have to unmute you.
Okay.
So try it again.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone, and I've really enjoyed this session. But this might be a fairly basic question, but I was very interested under secret number 5. Don't try to do marketing and PR alone. And it just seems like there are a lot of people that you need to bring on board: general manager, lawyer, right, casting director. And in my head, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. So when I see don't try to do marketing and PR alone, then does that mean your general manager should be trying to connect you with a good marketing firm, trying to promote simply on Facebook on your own is not sufficient. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit. And also if sort of as a sub question, what's a reasonable amount to spend on marketing? If you have X number of dollars in your budget, what percentage of that should be devoted to marketing?
Well, and marketing on your own is an interesting question, because depending on the level of where you are, like whether you're in a professional production that's going to run for 26 weeks, or you're something that's going to run for a weekend or whatever, the marketing, I think that the point of marketing on your own, the danger in that is that you have no one to bounce an idea off of, or you have no one to involve you in the process of what's working. And marketing on your own, if you're at a very minimalistic level, that could be 2 of your best friends. You can just say, okay, what do you think about this? Like, if I say this, does that resonate with you? Does that make any sense? And if you're at the level where you have a marketing person, they're going to have a team of people who are going to be bouncing those ideas around. I think that Kate's approach to that was, if you're living in a bubble, you have no idea what your marketing idea is how it's going to resonate with the rest of the community and the environment that you're in. And you might think, oh my God, this is so brilliant. Everybody's going to love this. And if you had just shared it with your best friend, they might have gone like, what were you thinking? It can be that simple level as opposed to. That's about marketing on your own.
Okay, thanks.
To me, there are 2 kinds of marketing: the kind you pay for and the kind you get for free. Okay. Social media is the kind that you get for free, because it doesn't take any effort to do a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter page. And my company relies a lot on social media because our audience are young people and they're connected on social media. But in order to get the free stuff, you have to be able to call a place and have them take your call. I know people here who do PR in New York, theater PR, and have been doing it for years, and they can call and say, hi, I want to talk to Ben Brantley, and he'll come on the phone.
Oh.
But I have to pay them to do that, because if I called Ben Brantley and wanted to talk to him, I go someplace else. I wouldn't go directly to him.
Right.
So the number that I heard was in books on producing is,
Yeah.
if I remember right, it's 25% of your
Yeah.
budget is
Okay.
marketing.
Yeah, I'd say it's always between 20 and 25%. I think if you're a Broadway show, it's 25%. If you're an off-Broadway show, it's about 20%. But but commensuratively, between 20 and 25, whatever the overall budget of your show is, about what you need to devote to marketing to be able to actually turn the marketing to turn those valuable marketing dollars into actual ticket sales or attendance, whether there's ticket sales or not. So that's pretty good. So if you're a $10,000 budget, you're looking at $2,500. If you're a $100,000 budget, $25,000.
Okay.
And
Great, thanks.
Reading like what you do at the depot. What I meant, don't do it on your own. Get your cast, get your stagehands, get everyone involved, because one, it's a collaborative effort. Two, you're going to multiply all that exposure and make it a requirement that everybody has to tweet and share and do something.
Great. Okay.
So, everyone, thank you so much, especially Pat.
Thank you.
I love you. You guys are great. Everyone that participated in this, I look forward to the 30-minute consultation session. We're going to have fun. We'll rock this, and this is wonderful. Thank you so much. So I've got Facebook Sunday soirees, Facebook Live. So join me every Sunday. I'm going to have a different topic just to try to make this a real community. So again, I appreciate each and every one of you. So until next month, see you later. And thank you, Tom. Thank you. Dearly.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
We'll get the
Nice to
replay
meet
tomorrow.
everyone. Nice to meet you, Craig. Nice to meet you, Maureen. Nice to meet you, Karen. Nice to meet you, Kate. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. You'll get the replay tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye.